This is Joe Wong. Welcome to the Trap Set. During the age of social distancing, we're recording remotely and releasing extra episodes. Today's guest is Sharon Van Etten. One of the most compelling artists to emerge in the past 20 years, Sharon presents startlingly vulnerable songs with a wholly unique, sublimely confident voice. She spoke to me from her home in Los Angeles. Hey Sharon, it's Joe.
Hey Joe, how are you?
I'm good, how are you? Were you playing some guitar?
Yeah, I was rocking so hard on my acoustic just now.
Can you play something for the listeners at home right now?
I'm sure they want to hear some power chords in a song they've heard 100 times before.
Well, maybe at the end. I've never done that before.
Yeah, we'll see.
How are you?
Geez, trick question. I'm good. I think it's an exercise right now in trying to just think about this unit in my bubble for a minute, because I think when I'm the most positive, it's just when I think about right now in the immediate. Because as soon as I start thinking outside and long term and a year from now and things like that, I get a little bit overwhelmed. But the day to day is okay, actually. And you? How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. My day-to-day life hasn't changed all that much. I mean, I am lucky enough that I moved from my loft downtown to a house in Pasadena almost a year ago now. And I have a studio behind my house, and I work as a film and TV composer lots of the time and still have some projects going. So I feel really fortunate that I can work and I can kind of engage in the same structure that I had already set up for myself. But that said, I feel like I'm moving at half speed, and my first album as a singer and kind of what quote unquote artist was supposed to come out on Friday, and everything got pushed back, and I was supposed to go on tour next week. That got pushed back. But you know what? I'm not heartbroken over that stuff, because, I can just write more songs in the interim, or try it.
Right. I mean, and like, and what choice do you have? I mean, that's the tricky part, I mean, I was supposed to go on. I mean, I feel lucky in that, my album came out last year.
And it's a great album.
Thank you. And that tour was supposed to lead up to my wedding. So the tour and the wedding did not happen. But obviously for the right reasons. And so it's bittersweet, but yeah, I do feel lucky that, we made the move from New York last year, and we're actually really close to you. We're in Glassell Park, so hopefully one day we can collaborate again in the same room.
Sounds good. Are you trying to do anything creative right now?
Well, I'm being gentle on myself,
Hmm.
but I do feel lucky because we have a 3-year-old son who was in daycare, and
And I met your son when he was a newborn, basically.
that's right, at Main Drag.
That's right. Yeah.
That was really fun. I actually just had a long distance connection with Fred Armisen because we might be doing something radical apart together soon.
Great.
But that was a really special show. I was just learning how to get comfortable taking the little man out.
Yeah, so for folks that weren't there,
um,
it was a run-up show for Fred's comedy special on Netflix that I helped produce, and Sharon was kind enough to be part of one of the live shows.
and it was Fred has always been supportive in my, in my hobby of wanting to learn improv and comedy while still, being a friend and a fan. And it's been fun to collaborate in different ways over the years. And that helped bring us closer together. So I thank you for that, Joe.
You're welcome.
So, so we, he was in daycare, and so we had a good schedule for a while. We had just hired a household assistant in February to kind of help me get out of mom mode in the morning, and she would help with transitions for the cleanup and our errands and things like that, so I could just go straight to the studio because I have a studio attached to my house, which is incredible. And so she would help do those things in the morning so I could go right to work. But then once school, daycares and schools got canceled, I became, I'm still a mom, that never changes, but the hands-on, while putting work aside to be more present, was the priority. But our assistant, who, young, like early 20s, straight out of college, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, wanted to learn the music industry. My partner's a manager and for artists as well, so she, we have a mutual friend. She was looking for work. We thought, okay, great, you can come and hang out and learn while also helping us be able to work and create and cohabitate with our amazing son. But her role changed pretty quickly, within a month of hiring her, which we felt badly about, but we felt lucky that she wanted to stay and be employed. And she and my son have this incredible bond. And so she'll come in the afternoons until about dinner time so that I can go into the office, but I'll have my mornings with my son and we'll do his e-learning. But then it's that, for me, that transition from being a mom and doing the dishes and the laundry and like crawling around and skating, and which is all really fun, and I do enjoy that to a degree, but then it's that switching of the gears and going into the studio and trying to be creative, which as soon as I get into that zone, I'm great, but there are days where it just doesn't happen, and I have to be okay with that because you can't force it anyway. But the amount of
I heard that
strain
if
that
you
is
just
just
flagellate yourself,
inherent.
then you become more creative. Is that right?
Well, like for a while, I was smoking like a halfie in the middle of the day just to kind of reset, and
Smoking a half
I
joint?
don't do that. Uh-huh. I don't do that very often. It's more usually like an end of the night on a weekend treat, and you know, I just feel like I'm still trying to figure out how to shift gears in a way that helps me relax because we're all in the same bubble. But I've actually been really inspired. I would say 50% of the time I am writing. I think I have enough songs for a record, and I've been FaceTiming and sending demos to my bandmates so that they're in on what I'm making right now, so they can be thinking about songs as I'm getting ready to do whatever it is I'm able to do when we get to that point. But that part is kind of hard to figure out. But we've been tracking separately, and my front of house, who is an engineer, he's been mixing a couple of things here and there for me, and I'm trying to keep my my unit engaged as we're all living these separate lives too, which is hard.
I mean, I've spoken to lots of people since the quarantine went into effect, and I think, like you say, everybody's in the same boat. And um, lots of people, whether or not they have added responsibilities of parenting or other things, are having trouble working at their normal rate creatively, just because of the psychic weight that this whole thing is placing on everyone's shoulders.
Well, it's so much, and I think there was an article in the Times that was just like, stop thinking you're going to get all this shit done. I mean, we're experiencing something that no one has ever experienced, as not just as a city or a state or a country, but the whole world. And it's something that even Ray Bradbury couldn't make up. I mean, there's too many levels emotionally and psychologically that I think we're putting pressure on ourselves to understand it. We're putting pressure on ourselves to go on like normal. And I think, my partner and I were really good communicators, and we have days where we're more stressed out or more paranoid or more careful, or, just along the way, we just keep talking to each other about, we're sensitive to each other's emotions, no matter what emotion it is. And we're just trying to be patient during this time and with each other, and just staying connected and not shutting down, even if we don't understand how we're feeling, because it's hard to grasp.
Did you grow up in New Jersey?
I did. I did. I lived in a town called Nutley up until sixth grade, and then I moved in the middle of my sixth grade year, which was really hard, and we moved to like the suburbs near Clinton. It was like going from Sopranos town to Bridges of Madison County, if that gives you any context.
What was the impetus for the move?
Well, looking back, it's crazy because as a teenager, I didn't care. Or not that I didn't care. Well, I probably didn't care, but I also didn't fully understand the weight of it. But, my mom had 5 kids.
Mine too.
Amazing. They're superheroes.
Where do you fall in the order?
I am like the middle of the middle. So you get an idea. What about you?
I'm the oldest.
Oh, you're the oldest. You set the bar.
I set a low bar. You're welcome to all my siblings.
Well, my mom, so we're all 2 years apart, and my mom like went to college to be a painter, and she went from art to art history and then had kids. And during that time, my parents figured out a way where my dad worked Monday through Friday shifts at a bank, and my mom took night classes at Montclair State. And by the time I was in sixth grade, she got her master's in history and became a teacher. And I still remember us having dinners together and both of my parents being very present. But when I think about that, it wasn't until like I was in sixth grade when this happened, and they figured out a way to make it work. And that's 15 years at home without having a job. I mean, I obviously acknowledge that being a mother is a huge job, so I'm not dismissing that that's not a job, but she poured her life into her family before she decided to go back to her passion.
Well, it must have been inspiring to see her go back to her passion and not give it up. So many people mean to go back to something that they had a passion for and never get around to it or dismiss it. So I wonder if that was empowering for you to watch.
Well, it's funny because I mean, I was a total angsty teenager who didn't want to be anything like my parents, especially my mother. But as I've gotten older, I realized like we're so much alike. You know, we're both Pisces. We both have many passions. We both can be scattered and get lost in the multitude of things that we like to try to do. um, you know, we used to make the joke that we're hobby girls. If we could have majored in hobbies in college, we would have like been, you know, head of the class, because we like to start learning how to do something, but then we're on to the next thing. So it wasn't until my mid to late 20s that I could really fully begin to understand what she sacrificed and her drive to pursue things that she cared about beyond her family. You know, when I was growing up, I was just your mom and dad, and these are your roles. And I was definitely just an introverted, angsty teenager that didn't know how to talk about anything.
Was it scary when she was shifting roles?
Honestly, I mean, I don't like to admit it, but I was really selfish about it all because, you know, I left, you know, I was thinking about leaving my life behind
Yeah.
and having to start over again and being scared to go into a new school. And it was definitely a different kind of vibe, you know. And then with another twist was that she was going to be teaching at the high school I was going to be going to. So that added like this, you know what I mean? It just added this whole other like, why would you do this to me? But like in the end, you know, like we had this mutual agreement to not have each other, although she was like the honors and AP history teacher. And I regret it now because I had friends that took her and I was in honors through high school. And that was the one class I didn't take honors in. And all of my friends that had her, they were just like, she's the best teacher. I mean, she's really hard, but she's smart and she's funny. And I was like, how do you see this in her? You know, it's like, really? Because we just used to, but we just butt heads all the time. You know, I mean, now I really wish I was just a fraction as smart and she's so graceful and eloquent, you know, but I maybe I was scared of that then. I didn't realize it.
Is she still teaching?
She's newly retired, trying to. Well, it's it's hard to say this now, but she really just wanted to travel. She loves traveling and she loves her grandchildren because she has five grandchildren now, and you know all of her five children are in happy, healthy relationships, and we all live in different states pretty much. So she was excited just to have the leisure to do so, but she only retired like a couple years ago.
Maybe you could take an AP history class with her over Skype.
Well, it's funny because you know, I started going back to school the last few years.
For psychology, right?
Yeah, the long term is to become a counselor, but I'm so far off because I didn't ever finish my undergrad, and I'm not even a junior in standing yet. And to transfer to a university here, you have to be a junior in standing. So I've been talking to a counselor at Pasadena City College, actually, to try to get some general requirements under my belt so that I can have a leg up when I go to apply to a university here. But I have to take like a statistics class, and I have to take like a biology class, and I think I have to take another history class too. So my mom can be my tutor.
Yeah, she can just teach you and then you can take the AP test and get the credits.
If only I had listened to her then. You know, I didn't understand what AP classes really were back then.
Oh, I thought you took AP classes in all the rest of your schooling.
I took honors.
Ah, got
And
it.
the two AP classes I took were music theory and English. And I think I got a credit for music theory, but not for English.
Oh, wow.
So,
See, I didn't take any music classes in high school. I guess I was in band class and I marched.
are you in marching band?
Yeah, I was a snare drummer in marching band.
Nice.
What about you?
And I loved the music department in high school. I was in choir. I I did choir all through high school, and then I was also in the musicals.
My regret, in the sense that you're regretting not taking AP history, is, since sixth grade, the choir teacher always wanted me to join choir, and I didn't want to do it because I wanted to be a rock drummer. And only now, like 30 years later, am I putting out my first album as a singer, and I wish I would have done, choir the whole way through. 'Cause- anyway,
Well, let me know if you ever want very non-traditional singing lessons.
I do.
Not that you need any. What is your record? When is it?
Well, it was supposed to come out on Friday, but I think it's going to come out maybe in the late summer or something. Now they're just putting out song by song for the first few songs.
Is Jag gonna release it?
It's coming out on Decca.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's interesting. I haven't, it's a new type of experience. It's certainly way different from working with Jaguar, which is a great label. It's the label that you're on.
Yes, it is.
I remember the first time I saw you play, I was with Darius and Chris from Jaguar, and we were at South by Southwest, and we went to see the Bada Bing showcase that you were playing at. And I thought you were so great.
Oh my
And then
gosh.
afterwards, we were at a party, and those guys had to leave and go to something else, and I was just hanging out drinking by myself, and you came and introduced yourself, and I never forget that because you were so friendly, and you said, "Oh, I hate it when people are sitting alone."
You're a loner.
I'm not a loner though, but maybe at that time I was feeling like a loner. I might have had social overload from South by
Oh my
Southwest.
gosh. But I mean, because that probably had to be 2010.
Probably, yeah.
Because I think I maybe played it one time after that in 2012, and then I couldn't, I was like, I was too overwhelmed to ever try to do it again. I mean, it just has become something so different from what I remember it being. But I didn't even see it what it was considered more grassroots. But the first year I played it, it was, I think, in 2004 or 2005, and I played mostly like house shows, not really, because I had no idea what I was doing. I booked shows myself. I was like, do you remember that site byofl.org?
Yeah, I mean, I remember when it was, well, it stands for Book Your Own Fucking Life. And I remember when it was a little book published by Maximum Rock and Roll.
Oh,
And
no
those were
way.
some of the first tours I did in the late 90s when I was a kid. We would go in that book, and usually the entries were outdated.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I remember that. And I loved it. I think it's so important that I did that because now, even though I'm working with a booking agent, like I have a fundamental understanding of what that person is at least doing. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a lot to string together dates and to think about drives and to, make sure they're safe and that they're taken care of. I mean, I worked at a venue for a while where I let bands crash at my house, but I had like a weird situation. So people thought I was probably super sketchy. I never put ads up, but if ever there was a band that I knew was sleeping in their car, I was like, do you just want to park in my driveway and sleep on my floor instead? But my house didn't have a front door. This was in
Wait, what?
Murfreesboro. Well, I'll say, okay, so this was in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and I worked at a venue called the Red Rose, and Parts and Labor may have even played there way back in the day, but I worked there from like 99 until about 2003, 2004. And like my friend Andrew Seward, he was in a band called Kill Devil Hills, and he went on to play bass in Against Me, and he was booking a lot of like the rock and punk shows. And so he was trying to teach me how to book shows and how to take care of bands. And a lot of my punk education and booking education happened through that venue. But I lived in like a short bike ride or a long walk away from the venue, and you roll up to this house, and it was a total slumlord that ran it, but it was it was like $280 a month or something, so you can't really
For the
complain.
entire house?
I had a 2-bedroom on the top floor, so like you go in, there's no front door. It's just a stoop and an open door, and there's 2 apartments downstairs, and I had the one upstairs. And like you go up the stairs and there's like 2 inches off the floor where the door is, and then you open it into the kitchen, and then there's like a bedroom to the right and a bedroom to the left. And every time I took a bath, it flooded the apartment below me. But it was like my first apartment, so I was like, it's mine, And like, and half of the bands were punk rock, and they get it. They were like crashing on couches. I just had like a carpeted floor and an empty bedroom, and they were so cool. But I don't know. I feel lucky that when I was booking my own shows and other people took me in, I just had so much respect for the people that did it themselves. And I'm so glad I'm not booking it now, because it was not my strength. But,
I
it
think
is
it's trickier to do it yourself now.
I'm sure.
Well, I had a similar experience because when I was 18, I moved into a house that already had established itself as a punk house. So myself and 2 of my 18-year-old knucklehead friends moved into this house, and immediately people were calling us for shows, and we would have, up to 4 shows in the basement every week. And it was pretty much the most disgusting house you can imagine. 3
Where was
18-year-old boys in Milwaukee. And but lots of people played there that later went on to fame and fortune. And the craziest thing is, I mean, this house was absolutely disgusting when we lived there. We would just like play crazy games like throwing hammers at each other, and they would go through the walls and no one cared. And there were squirrels living in the walls. And it was just fucking disgusting. And it got burgled 3 times.
Oh, geez.
And this was back in the days when, if somebody came to your house show, everybody would bring beers and smoke in the basement, and it would.
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes it would be packed with 50 people in a basement smoking cigarettes, and the humidity of human bodies. It was just disgusting. But somebody moved in after us and managed to make it even much like exponentially more gross. And years later, someone told me to watch a TV show called Hoarders. And in the very first episode, it was my punk house, and a lady had moved in and started hoarding food.
No way.
Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing.
So she goes in the basement where there's just like food knee deep and all these coolers with extra food. And there's still stickers from bands that had played there on the rafters, if you look.
Aww.
So it was funny. Well, did you love singing in choir when you were a kid?
I mean, I think I started doing it like out of necessity, because when I moved in 6th grade, up until then, the elementary school I was going to in Nutley, it was called Yanakaw. They had an amazing music program. And from at a young age, I got free lessons through the school, instruments included. And I got to take violin and clarinet. And
I took those 2 instruments as well.
Yeah, I mean, they're great for beginners. I remember I wanted to play the flute, and the guy looked at me, and he was like, "You're a clarinet player." I was like, "What the
love
fuck
the
is
clarinet.
that
I still
supposed to
have
mean?"
one. Yeah.
I mean, I love it. Like, I wish I, kept that up, because it's such a beautiful instrument. But at the time, I just remember being like, "Are you saying that I'm not good enough to play flute? Like, what does that even mean, that I'm not not a flute player? What are you looking at?"
Yeah, I mean, by the way, the clarinet is not an easy instrument.
But I wasn't particularly good at either of them, but I feel like I always knew that I liked music. And then in the end, like my last year, they had a group called the Mini Singers that I tried to sing, and I it was like outside of church, which I did go to church with my mother every Sunday, and even though I'm not a super religious person, I that feeling of singing with a group of people like stirred something in me that I feel like I'm still learning what that does.
Well, that's kind
Um,
of like the original function of music, right? Is that sense of connectedness.
mhm. And when you sing, like you can sing in unison. Like my silly joke as a kid was that when the whole church was singing the melody, I'd be the only one singing the harmony. And like that was me being a tough kid to my mom. Like, watch this. I'm gonna sing harmony. But she actually was like, you should do choir in high school. Like, you should take choir. And I'm like, really? Isn't that what all the nerds take? And
I know.
but I
That's why
ended
I
up.
didn't do it. I wish I would have done it, man. I
So
was
you,
like,
you
I
just
want to
you
play
decided to
Nirvana
do.
songs on my drums.
I'm gonna be in marching band. I'll show them.
Yeah, right.
But I ended up really loving it. But it was to make friends. Honestly, I knew I loved music. I wasn't good at any particular instrument at that point, and I just wanted to do something that felt creative. I wasn't, uber talented at anything, so I started doing choir, and then we traveled a little bit for it, and that was fun. Then you met other kids at other schools that were in arts programs, and then you met other kids that were writing songs and collaborating, and it was, I don't know, it was really eye opening, and I met a lot of kids that helped me get through those years at high school because they were pretty tough for me. Um,
What made it tough?
I I just feel like most kids grew up with the same kids their whole lives. And, I had made friends in the last couple of years from living out there. But then, the few friends that I did make, high school kind of reset that, and, and I'm a pretty shy kid. So I'm not like a, social butterfly. Like I didn't go to parties and I didn't party. I mean, I remember specifically having a birthday party for my friend Michelle when we were in high school, and as crazy as we got, we had a food fight in her basement, and we got chocolate stains on the walls. I mean, you know, I was maybe like a cigarette smoker and skipped school once to drive to the beach with a friend, and that was kind of it. It was like rocking music super hard, driving around in cars. But I didn't. I was not a social kid, so I think that aspect of it. That's what high school is really for, right? It's really a social experiment more so than anything. But I had a handful of friends that got me through it, and you know, um, made me realize like, okay, I want to get out of here.
What did that mean to you at the time?
Anywhere but here, I guess. I somewhere where also I'm one of five kids, so imagine the legacy of all of my siblings that are much more, they're more partiers, they're more social, they're more outgoing. And so it was always, oh, you're Steve's sister, Jess's sister. Like I was little VE, like that little VE, even though I was the middle. So that kind of trying to live that down in a town where your mom is also a teacher at your high school.
Mrs. VE.
Yeah, Janice. But I think it just encouraged me to seek outward, in a similar way that my mom was like, you should do choir. You're a musical kid. I looked outward to look for a college that had a music program because they didn't have a major in New Jersey at the time for recording. And so Middle Tennessee State had a recording major for production and technology, and I felt like it was super affordable too because you can get in-state, out-of-state tuition because they don't have the major in your home state, and so that was a selling point. And also a kid that was a year older than me, who I was in choir with, went a year ahead of me, and my AP music theory teacher recommended the school to my mother. So I was like, all right, I'm going to get out of here. I mean, I don't know if from New Jersey to Murfreesboro, Tennessee was a sidestep. I mean, it wasn't necessarily like upgrading from Jersey, but it was far enough away where I felt like I made this choice on my own to kind of start a new life and see how it worked out. And I mean, it didn't work out, but I learned a lot.
You told me the day that you show me your face, we'd be in trouble for a long time. I can't wait to afraid of nothing. I can't wait to be high from nothing.
Hello, Trap Set listeners. Night Creatures, the album that Sharon and I alluded to earlier, my first solo album, is now available for pre-order. It was mastered by Bob Weston and pressed on 180-gram vinyl, and all profits benefit the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. Go to joewong.bigcartel.com or click on the link in the episode description to pre-order.
Well, I mean, with hindsight, I've learned so much, you know. But you know, I went for a year of school, and I won't say like I dropped out. I feel like I stopped going after a year because I knew my heart wasn't in it, and I wasn't doing well. I didn't fail out. I wasn't kicked out. I didn't just stop going in the middle. But after a year, I just decided that it wasn't for me. And I wasn't connecting. I also didn't realize you had to take all these general classes all over again to get to this point. And that really pissed me off because I was just like, why do I need to take biology if I want to be in the studio? Like, I'm so frustrated right now. But anyway, I met kids that were just like, you got to just go directly to this. Like, what do you want to do? And I was like, I love music. They're like, okay, well, figure that out. And so I was also like dating a guy at the time, and it was super unhealthy and wasn't necessarily encouraging my education. But he was in a band and toured a lot, and so that interested me, and I wanted to understand his lifestyle. And so I got a job at this cafe called the Red Rose that I told you about a little bit, and I'm grateful for that education because that's where I really had my first sense of family away from home. And they all looked out for me. They all knew that I wasn't in the best situation in my home. They knew that I wasn't in the best situation in my relationship. And really the best part of my day was like going there and listening to music that the other workers were playing, and also getting to hear bands almost every night, whether it be open mic, jazz, or like mostly the weekends were the rock shows and stuff. And I just felt like part of a community that I never really had.
What did you do at the cafe?
I made a killer peanut butter smoothie. No, well, I started off as a barista, honestly.
Man, that was my first job. Like after I left school in Washington D.C.
Amazing. I think everyone should work in service before they do anything else because it is a thankless job, and you really learn how to work with people and treat people with respect. I mean, I sometimes I flinch when I hear people in front of me in line treat workers a certain way, you know, like
Especially in Los Angeles.
oh my gosh. And now with cell phones too, because when I lived there, I didn't have, I mean, I think maybe towards the end I had a cricket phone or something, but I didn't have a cell phone, and people are on the phone in line, like ordering while I'm like talking to somebody else. It's it's a whole different ball game now. But I I learned how to make a sandwich super fast, and like when you cut it a certain way, it looks beautiful when you open it up and put it in that red basket. I mean, when I got it just right, I was, you know, points in my brain for myself. I also loved putting on headphones and just doing the dishes, on certain days, and just finding the things that were very meditative, that just the simple acts of sweeping and mopping and things that I would never have done for my parents very well, but I took pride in because it felt like part of a communal effort.
Yeah, another thing that I realized through working at lots of restaurants, I grew up in a restaurant family, is that, you might be fortunate enough to have other jobs in your life if that's what you want to do, but you're never going to work harder. And so that's kind of how I view the world. Like if I look at a skyscraper, in my mind, I know that whoever's working on the top floor is not working any harder than the person that's cleaning that floor. You know what I'm saying?
Oh my God, because you can't. It's simpatico, right? I mean, is that the right? You couldn't get to that place without them.
Right.
And you wouldn't be able to concentrate if your garbage was overflowing, you don't even know where to put that garbage, that top floor guy, do you?
Well, I think it also kind of dismantles the idea that the people that are quote unquote successful in this world are successful because they've worked harder than everybody else. It's just not true. They might have just had the opportunity or a skill set that happens to, bring them that success. But they're not working harder than the person that's mopping their floor.
Definitely not.
So you were in an unhealthy relationship with a banned person. You're working at this cafe. I mean, I have a very similar experience. Like I was in a weird band situation when I was living in DC, and I was working at a cafe, and I'm still friends with people that I worked with 20 years ago from that place. And I know exactly what you're talking about. Like everybody would take turns playing CDs, and then you'd hear whatever else other people were getting into.
I remember there was a guy, his name was Joey. He had a band called The Gold Room, and he was a touring musician that they hired knowing that he toured. And like I remember that being a big deal, because it's like you're a touring musician trying to get a job. Most people were like, look elsewhere. But they one day I remember Cat Power came on. It was the first time I heard Cat Power. And I just remember I stopped in my tracks and I was like, who is this? And it was kind of like older brother scenario where he put his hands on my shoulders and was like, you don't know. And in the same day, I got exposed to Cat Power and Velvet Underground. But I was such a late bloomer. So that was like probably early 2000s where I heard them for the first time.
By late bloomer, you mean you didn't explore certain types of music until you were a little older?
Right, but it's like when you hear something and you can't believe that it's been around for so long,
Right, where it's speaking to you and you're like, where has this been? And it's like, well, it's been at the record store the whole time.
I know, but I just
broke up before you were born.
It's just like one of those things that for some reason either you just completely missed or you didn't hear in the right context because, it still happens. I mean, thank goodness it still happens, but that's
a sign that you're still open if it still happens, because it can go away if you get too jaded.
Yeah, well, I definitely have the New Music Friday days where I'm like, do I hate everything? I don't know. And then I'm like, no, I do not. I do not. I do not hate everything. I'm open, Joe.
Well, I mean, I only say that as somebody who's been closed off at certain stages in my life, or at least closed off to new things after touring too much or just getting my heart broken by music too much or something, and then reverted to, oh, well, I'm only going to listen to acknowledged geniuses, like why should I listen to New Music Friday when I can just listen to Lou Reed or Stravinsky or, Kate Bush or something. Why even bother with this new stuff?
Well, you know what you're going to love, and I feel like as I'm having conversations with friends right now about what they're listening to and feeling guilty for not being exposed to new music. I mean, right now a lot of people are just seeking the comfort of what they know. And I mean, we've been listening to the Beatles nonstop because that's what my son loves. And it also brings me back to my childhood where it was like one of the few bands that we could all sing along together. And it's so innocent and it helps me just kind of like forget things for a minute. And I think you need that in music. And I go through phases where I spend a whole day just seeking new stuff. And it's like, yeah, I might look through 20 artists and like one or something. But there are days where I want that seeking and adventure and like, to try to find something new for my brain, my heart, my soul. But other days I want to go to exactly this one place, and that's where you go for it.
Earlier, you referred to smoking a halfie in the middle of the day, but one thing that I find is if I have a little bit of cannabis, it kind of strips away my critical mind a bit. And when I listen to music, I hear it with child's ears in a really nice way.
Well, I used to do this night called Wino Wednesdays one of my first jobs in New York was at Astor Wines, and I would bring a bunch of wine home and get bread and cheese and charcuterie, and I would invite maybe like just 6 friends and just say, just bring one of your favorite records right now. And so everyone would bring a record. We'd just drink wine and listen to music. And as the night went on, like you would forget that other people were turning you on to this music because you've been listening to it for a while. People are going into your collection, and it's just, yeah, maybe wine was involved, but that act of sharing music and the comfort of knowing it's your friend recommending it or something. I might not even be making sense right now, but
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I have record nights at my house where friends come over and bring albums. And, I think now it's easier than ever to put on music as background, but it's fun to create the conditions for deliberate listening.
I think we just moved here in September, and one of the things I miss is, we still have our vinyl in boxes because we don't have shelving for it, because it was IKEA shelving that we just left in New York because the movers were like, don't even bother moving this. It's going to cost more to move. But now we're here, and most of our records are still in boxes. We have like 2,000 records that are now in a closet, and we're waiting for someone to make us shelving. And so like we went through a few of them to have maybe like 100 records just out in our living room, but we just have a very shifty setup right now, and I miss just being able to put on any record that I want. And I know you can do that on Spotify or whatever, but there's something very different about like, I want this one. I remember where I got this record. I remember who turned me on to it. I like holding it in my hands, and when there's lyrics, I love following along. And just that kind of like that my dad used to do that for me, and my friends and I used to do that in New York. And now we're getting into a routine here in Los Angeles, but I know it's going to take a minute, especially right now, but that is something I'm looking forward to working towards.
Well, we'll definitely invite you guys the next time we do a record night. It'll be fun.
That'd be amazing.
I got a middle-aged man like tube amp for my records and a nice turntable.
Oh,
it's
nice.
like a midlife crisis gift to myself.
Amazing.
As I'm about to turn 40.
Are those the ones that are exposed?
I did get one with exposed tubes. Yes.
Mm-hmm. No, that's beautiful.
If I stare at the glow of the tubes, I think my existential dread goes away for just a little while, Sharon.
Well, it's funny because like we're trying to help. A friend of ours is helping us design shelving because we just have we have a living room where all our books and all our shelving have to live on this one wall. So we're like, if we're gonna live here for a while, like we want to make this, beautiful. Since everything has to live here, but we have a 3-year-old, and we're trying to teach him how to hold a record, But he, the buttons, like we have an old Marantz receiver, and he loves the blue lights, and he already broke the radio knob. Like there's some old wiring in it, so I think we need to get it cleaned up, like tuned up at like an electronic place near here. But all these things that have been on our list as we're settling into a new home. So I look forward to when everything is just there and set and safe, because right now you kind of have to watch the little guy as he pulls out records and reaches for the speakers and likes punching the little webbing on the anyways. We'll get there.
Sister, don't mind that I'm not on time. She knows that I'm through with that. Sick of trying. Don't let mine. Mama's still love and Daddy's still love. They know that I'm here like that. Unlike mine, true and kind. Call me your side and I will now be, and I will be fine with that. You don't leave me now, you might love me back. Distance is fine, I know you can't care, and nothing is big like that. You don't see me now, I don't see you back. One day I'll be fine with that.
So my days in Tennessee were, my boyfriend was an addict, and he was super paranoid, and he didn't want me to play music at all. And I wrote songs, and he went to a couple of my open mics, but then he told me that the style of writing that I was doing, he was like, it's too personal. They're not good enough. People are going to know exactly what you're talking about. That means it's not a good song. And so he's like, you have to be a better writer before you really start playing out. So like, I'm 19. He's telling me this. So whenever he went on tour, all my friends were like, you gotta play. And I used to play open mics whenever he left town, and I would get in trouble because he would find out. But it was mostly from people that liked it. And, and I
So in
remember,
hindsight, you can recognize that he was just an insecure person.
but I was also insecure too, because I was like, he's definitely really smart. He's book smart. He was, he's an intellectual, but,
Right.
and I know that I'm not so much, but I knew that I wrote with feeling, and I knew I had a good voice. I wasn't a great guitar player, but, people would try to play with me and whatever. I didn't have high expectations on myself other than I just felt this drive to play. Like, it felt really good, and I felt better every time I did it. And I got to this certain point where I was like, I need to get out of here. It was kind of like, again, it was like a bunch of my friends were they said, you need to reach back out to your family. You're not in a healthy relationship. You need to do music. Like, you have something. But I didn't know what that meant. But I also felt really trapped, and I started to feel unsafe in my relationship. And so my sister, who lived in Vermont at the time, helped me get back home because I was, so broke just working as a barista and with an addict. And so I lived with her for a little while to get back on my feet, and she convinced me to reach out to my parents, who took me in. And so then this is where I really, I think I finally had more conviction in what I wanted to do, because my parents' conditions on me moving back in, imagine how old was I? It was 2004. So I was, oh my God, I was 23. So I was 23 moving back in with my parents, and they said, you can live with us for a year if you see a therapist, if you go to school part-time, and if you get a job, which totally fair conditions. And so I did all of those things. And my therapist she used to be a jazz singer in New York, and she raised kids. And when her husband got sick, she decided to stay home. That's roughly her story. But she was so encouraging me of like going to shows in New York. And as I met people, I started playing some shows in New York, because I would sometimes be late to therapy because I spent the night and I got caught in traffic commuting from New York to go back to Jersey. And she just said, you know what, I think you really want to go to New York. How do you feel about that? And we would talk about it. And she gave me the confidence because I was having a lot of panic attacks at the time. I had a lot of anxiety, like social anxiety, going from the suburbs to Tennessee to now trying to hang out at like Bowery. I was a case, and but she gave me a lot of tools to work on my anxiety. And when I started sharing my music with her, she continued to say, I think you need to do music. And at the same time, I was working at a wine shop in New Jersey, and the owners were encouraging me. They even got me a recommendation to go to Astor Wines. And so after a year of saving money, I found a place through Craigslist back when you could find some decent apartments. And I found like a bedroom in a loft apartment in New York, like it was like Broadway and Marcy, like right where the Marcy stop is on the JMZ. Like you could actually touch the train from one of the bedroom windows. And I just remember thinking, even though I was overwhelmed with anxiety and the change in a city, I also felt definitely more accepted and ready to start playing music. But again, not ever as, I'm sorry, this answer seems really long.
It's a great answer.
But like, I think the overall answer is like, there were certain points where I had a crossroads, and I knew that I couldn't just do music, and that it wasn't like that's what I want to do for my work. I was always driven to do it, and I was driven to perform, but I also had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know a lot about label structure or, how to tour or how I was going to make money. Like it was like, I'm going to have a job to make money, and then I'm going to play music when I can. And I'm going to work with people that understand that so that I can do both. And while I was working at the wine shop, I reconnected with my friend Alicia, who I met at MTSU. And she was working with Ben Goldberg at Bada Bing, and they hired me as an intern while I was working at Astor Wines. And like that was definitely the beginning of feeling more of an acknowledgement of my music, because when Ben found out that I played music and didn't tell him about it, and he heard that I played a show and didn't invite him, he was like, don't ever do that again. Next time, bring me a flyer, tell me about it, I will be there. And it was like baby steps the whole entire way of just, I was an open mic kid up until I was 24. So I don't know what that means.
How did you feel about the material that you were writing at the time?
I mean, I understood that it was super personal and came from a dark place, but I also felt like it was still uplifting in a weird way, because there was usually like a sense of that, like, but I'm okay. I'm getting out of this, It was rarely stayed in the dark place. And there was some kind of self-awareness in it. Like when I look back at lyrics now, I'm like, oh geez, yeah, that's crazy. But I knew that the act of writing it helped me get out of it. So hopefully somebody can listen to it in the same way.
How do you differentiate between a good song that might end up on a record and something that you might, pass over?
For me, I love a melody, and if a melody really sticks with me, even if it takes a minute to get it right, like I know there's something to it. Like I have a folder of like melodies that I'm like, this one day I'll work on this when I'm feeling a block, you know, like I have these assignments for myself for whenever I'm not feeling creative. And I'm like, these are good ideas that haven't gotten there yet. But then there's like the, I still don't like throwing anything away. So I definitely have a folder of, those are songs I wrote that the melody isn't special. The chord progression definitely sounds like something else I can't put my finger on. And the lyrics just feel super cliche and weird. And I know that I've put out songs where there's cliches in there or whatever, but you know, when it's all of those things in one, in one, where I'm like, kind of sounds like another song, melody's not great. You know, I'm glad I got it out of my system, because it's just like you go to work some days and you just have a bad day, you know, but you go to work. Yeah, I'm misquoting Nick Cave right now, but
Right.
he had an awesome, like, you just go to work, even if you don't feel like you change the world, at least you're working on yourself, and it's constantly honing your craft.
Right. Yeah. And other people that have been on this show have used the metaphor of fishing for songs or panning for gold. And I think, you know, by going to work every day, you're just improving your fishing skills and increasing the odds that maybe you'll catch something good. Or even
Absolutely.
understanding what it means to catch something good for you, because something that you might throw back in the water could be somebody else's, could fit with somebody else. Or maybe like the ones that you put in your folder for later are good ideas that you're just not ready for yet, right? That
Yeah.
years down the line, then they start resonating with you in a different way.
Yeah, I might just start a folder that just says like after I die, you know, like, because some songs I've written that I do think that are too personal, where you know, it's like, you know, I poetry that I write that I will never share with anyone, that I'm like, I'm not a poet, you know. And there's some songs where I'm like, I just had to get out for myself, but like I don't want people to hear this right now. And this is not what the world needs now, is like a confessional of my 21-year-old self. But I don't know, I think as I've been learning to write for other people and with people, I feel like they're all really good exercises anyway, where you're just kind of letting it go, whether or not it be for you or somebody else, you know?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I was so blocked from putting out a personal statement for a long time, and only by composing music for other people's projects, film and TV, did I kind of develop the tools that I needed to finally get out of my own way with my own music.
Why did you want to do it
Why did I?
after all? Yeah, after all this time.
Well, it's something that I always wanted to do, but wouldn't admit to myself. Like, I feel like I had somewhat of a creative voice from an early age, and I started touring when I was really young and playing shows when I was really young. And then I think, you know, I went to music school that made me feel like I was an idiot and I needed to start from scratch. And then I played with some people that are similar to the person that you were describing, where in hindsight, I'm recognizing that they might have been really talented, but it was not necessarily that great for me creatively. And then, like, the larger thing that I see is that I was seeking out people that would like help me push away my creative tendencies, and then I kind of got to a certain level of proficiency as a drummer, and I love drums. I mean, they were my entry into this world, really. But it's a place where I could hide, because I knew I could service other people's songs, and I got pretty good as a composer too. And again, like, it's creatively satisfying, especially when you're working with someone who's brilliant. But it's also you don't have to give 100% of yourself. In fact, like, you're there to facilitate someone else's vision. So I was it was like I was getting a creative fix, but I wasn't really expressing the ideas that I had been building up. And then ultimately, there was just enough sadness in my life that I had to let it out. So, yeah, that's kind of a roundabout way of answering your question.
Well, I'm so glad that you were able to get it out and speak for yourself. And I can't wait to hear it. I'm sorry that it was delayed, but I'm looking forward to hearing when it does come out, Joe.
Well, this isn't about me. It's about you, Sharon. And
Oh,
my next question is, if you listen to your early recordings, how do you feel?
wow. Okay.
You see that? You got me talking for a second
All
there, but
right.
now the tables are turned.
Is this where I start crying?
It happens a
so my
lot, believe it or not.
This is my CBS Sunday morning part. Well, I have it's funny. So one of my best friends who I knew actually in my Tennessee days, his name is Taylor. He he worked at the record store in Murfreesboro, and I worked at the venue, so I would bring flyers over there all the time, and I would get music recommendations from him about what was out. And he moved to New York early on and was an engineer at Sony. And he snuck me in after hours to record my first demos that aren't out. They're not out in the world, but I remember we got like 2 12 packs, and I used to chain smoke. I probably smoked 2 packs of cigarettes that day. And
Do you
you can
still smoke
hear,
cigarettes?
definitely not. No, especially not like that. I'll sneak here and there, but like,
Yes. It's
you
really
know,
great. I had one the other day. It
yeah.
really is. It's all it's cracked up to be, man.
I know. I'm not much of a vapor. Just like there's some kids that I see. Like I remember I went to Coney Island right before we left, and we saw these kids like trying to hide it, and they were like just like behind a tent, just like huge cloud of smoke, and I'm just like I want to go over there and just be like that does not look cool or sexy at all. I mean, and I know that I shouldn't be saying this because I know smoking is terrible for you. I know that. But it looks so much cooler. I'm sorry. And it does. I still like it. And I hate that about it.
And vaping is probably just as bad for you.
We just don't know it yet,
Yeah.
right? Because they don't know all the chemicals that you're putting into your body. And I know I feel lucky enough that I've learned to control it to this stage. Because in Tennessee, it's like, you people smoke 2 packs a day. You smoke at the laundromat. You smoked at the video store. You smoked at the it was like you might as well be smoking.
It basically sounds like paradise.
So I'm in my, I'm almost 40, and I definitely don't bounce back like I used to. And touring takes a toll, as you know. And so I'm like, all right, and I'm also like now a mom where I feel like I need to be more of a role model, and just like, okay, well, that's not what I want my memory to be for him, but I like having fun, and
Come here,
sometimes
baby. Mama loves you.
this will make you tougher in the long run. But so anyway, I remember smoking like 2 packs right before I did these demos, and you can like, you hear these songs and you're just like, I know exactly where I was when I did it, where I was, how I was feeling, what I was going through, what my haircut looked like, and all those things where I'm just like, oh, poor baby, where I'm like, I was having fun with my friend, but I was also very, I was going through all these stages of trauma, going through, my ex who was an addict, and I was singing these songs that were very detailed. And, one day I'll release them, because they're just super raw blues. Like, it doesn't sound like my voice right now. That's for sure. I sound like a 60-year-old man singing country at a club, like at a bar.
That sounds great.
So like, I mean, there's a song literally called White Lines. And but I'm proud of them, and I think that it took me a lot to write them and to share them and to have that experience with my friend, my first real studio experience that we'll share forever. And but I think about that a lot with my older songs, where it's some girls find their diaries, and I find these old songs, and I just want to hug that little girl, you know.
If you think about the songs that you're writing now versus the songs you wrote when you were first starting out, does it reveal an evolution in the way that you process the world or regard yourself?
Well, I think now the what how I used to write was mostly about processing things that had already happened, and they were mostly about love and heartache, and I know a lot of my emotions come from anxiety, but then also I was a very closed off kid, like I said earlier, and I always had a hard time communicating my emotions, especially initially going through something. And writing songs was a way for me to process it in a healthier way. But it wouldn't be until after I've written the song and I'm editing lyrics and kind of carving out what these stream of conscious kind of lyrics are that I'm forced to look at what my inner dialogue actually is. And I still kind of write in that stream of conscious way, but as I'm looking at the lyrics, it's a lot more present, and it's a lot more about what's going on in my life now and my relationships. And because of how much I've grown and gone through, I feel like I have more perspective that's not just what I'm going through, but how it affects other people too. And um, am I answering your
Yeah,
question?
I think that kind of nicely segues into my next question, which is I noticed that your email signature contains a quote from Patti Smith that says, "We go through life, we shed our skins, we become ourselves." So, what about that quote in particular resonated with you to the extent that you wanted to use it as an email signature?
Well, I think it's just you're always yourself. You know, when you think you keep looking for it, and yes, you're growing, but it's just, I mean, hopefully you're growing. But I think people are always soul searching and wondering who they are, which is good to ask yourself these questions. But like, you're also there, like, you're always there. You're the one asking the questions, you're the one experiencing things, you're the one that has been through pain and through love and seen wonderful things. And everything you experience is all a part of who you are and who you're becoming. And that's all still you. And there's something really comforting in that to me.
What do you think about most throughout the day?
Oh my goodness. Well, right now that's a tricky question. At the moment, it's honestly meal planning. I When it was just me, it's like a whole other thing. But I think that kind of dictates the day a lot because it's harder to plan getting food and groceries, and I'm planning for a family too. So if I'm honest about that, it's mostly a lot of basic survival things and making sure we have the everyday needs that we need, our everyday needs, while not being able to go. I mean, I've been in my car twice since March, and I was still learning. I'm still learning how to be a mom, and I was learning how to just plan on a regular schedule, let alone like 2 weeks out. Making sure that we eat a balanced diet and showing our son all the things that we're supposed to be showing him, and trying to get lesson plans together and at least something learning, something educational every day for him. Just how do we maintain a routine in this? That's been a lot of my day to day outside of work.
Do you worry about anything? And I'm not talking about anything like particular to this crisis, but are you a worrier in general?
Yeah, I am. But not to. I don't think it's an excess. I'm not an excessive worrier, but I do. I don't know. I always just want to. I'm not like a, what do you call an alarmist. But I think when it gets to a point, I'm like, okay, well, these are things I think we should worry about. I don't know. I don't know how to go into that without going too specific, but I think I'm a healthy worrier.
If you could go back in time and talk to 20-year-old Sharon, what would you tell her and what would you ask her?
You really need to get out more. And have you called your mother lately?
Well, now I think that's a good place to end it. Sharon Van Etten, thank you so much for being on the show.
Well, thanks, Joe. It's really, really nice to talk to you.
The Trap Set is produced by me, Joe Wong, along with Chris Karwowski, who also edits the program. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at The Trap Set, and visit our website, thetrapset.net, to subscribe to our show for free. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please donate to our show. If you can't afford to donate, please tell a friend and give us a good rating on iTunes. Send your feedback and guest requests to thetrapset@gmail.com.